All right, one last look at your traffic and weather from the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center on your Wednesday. Couple accidents to report. One at I-26 westbound near Mile Marker 129. 2 middle lanes blocked there. Another one at Fernandina and Piney Grove. And then one at 378 and I-26 as well. Today, high of 91 degrees with a good bit of wind. High tomorrow of 87 and then 81 on Friday. It's getting nice and warm as we get closer to summertime. That's your traffic and weather from the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center here on the Early Game. Nine o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head live in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios here in Columbia. Jack Veltri joining us from Hoover, Alabama, from a hotel room before he has to make the long drive back later on this afternoon, which, if you've been living under a rock in the past 24 hours, would indicate that South Carolina did not win their first game of the SEC tournament, and in the new single elimination format, they are indeed heading home to look into the long, cold offseason, because we knew going into yesterday the only way to make the NCAA was to win 5 games and win the SEC tournament, which, of course, is not going to happen. Jack, at long last, this disastrous, embarrassing, pathetic, whatever word you want to use to describe its season, has finally come to an end.
Yeah, put any adjective in there. It's literally ad libs. Like Mad Libs. Put an adjective in front of the word season, and don't use the word good, because it was not a good season. Use any adjective to describe how bad this year was, and you'll be fine. So, yeah, it's the end of a very disappointing year for this program. The expectations, I don't think, were Omaha level. I don't think that was realistic, but ideally, you thought, okay, make a regional, be competitive, and see if you can go on a run, right? Look better than you did last year, because last year's team was good. And you harken back so many times to what Paul Maneri said in his introductory press conference last year, which has kind of just been used as a reference point to kind of resemble some of the struggles that are going on now. Last year, he said the team was not in the doldrums. Mm-hmm. They won 37 games. They won a game in a regional. This team has talent, and they have a lot of opportunity to be better this year. Well, in every regard, the team was worse this year. So he talked about not being in the doldrums last year. He certainly is this year, and it's hard to envision what next year is going to look like, just because this roster is going to look tremendously different. And as we'll get into, obviously, Maneri, we know, isn't going to be going anywhere, seemingly, but it also seems like everything else is going to remain the same, which, if you've paid attention and for long enough now and know just how bad the season's been, I don't think that's exactly what you want to hear.
No, a lot to unpack from this, and certainly we want to get your reactions as well. 803-404-6100, Love Chevrolet phone lines, and the Firehouse Subs text line as we give the final analysis of South Carolina baseball in 2025. But first, it is 9 o'clock, and we do got to kick things off with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Yes, indeed. Yesterday, South Carolina baseball taking on Florida. the first round of the SEC tournament. Falls 11-3 in that game. It looked like for a little while it could have ended up being a run roll, which would have gotten you out of there at least a little bit earlier, but that was not the case, which is a little bit better than how the last series against them ended at the very least. But I thought it was very interesting because the game starts, South Carolina, being the away team, is the lower seed, quickly loads the bases with no outs. And you're thinking, okay, hey, maybe they can actually get a decent first inning out of this. They get one run. And if that isn't a description of how this season has gone, I don't know what is.
On a double play too, of course. That's how the season goes. And then the funniest part after that, and it didn't come back to hurt them in the bottom of the first inning, but I saw a lot of people bringing this up when I look back at it, I'm like, oh my gosh. The bottom of the first inning, that pop out to Bo Hollins that would have ended the first inning for Brandon Stone, retire the side in order, all that, no harm done. He drops a pop-up that goes right to him, and the sun was in his eyes. You want to know where his sunglasses were, Tyler?
On the back of his head? Or on the top of his hat?
They were on his hat.
Yeah.
You want to know what he did the next time there was a pop-up? His sunglasses were on his face. So I don't get it. What is the point in having sunglasses with the sun right in your eyes right before the play? You're not wearing your sunglasses. What is going on there? It obviously did not come back to hurt them, but the first inning is kind of just the microcosm of how the season's gone when one little thing happens and everything just falls apart.
Yeah, and look, I forgot, was it 3 or 4 home runs they gave up yesterday? And again, pitching getting peppered as they have been throughout the entire season. We'll get into that a little bit more specifically, but and Maneri alluded to it after the game. Yesterday was kind of a microcosm for what this entire season was. A lot of the frustrations you had throughout the entire year, you saw over the course of 9 innings yesterday. And I think a lot of us watching that game were like, all right, X amount of more outs and this thing's over and we can move on to the offseason.
Yeah, it's, it just got to a point where it's like they're down 11-3. And you're just like, this is how the entire season went. Like, this is not a surprise. Like, after watching this team as much as we have this year, man, it's just this season was an utter disaster, and you have so much work to do to fix it. I don't even think this is as simple as just go bring in new players. Let Paul work with his own guys, and that's how this thing will get fixed. Maybe so. I'd love to be proven wrong, but this is far beyond any player issue. I don't even think the players are at fault necessarily for a lot of the problems. There's a lot of talent on this team. Paul was right about that, but they all underperformed, and I think that goes back, and it's a reflection on the job that the coaching staff did this year.
And with the coaching staff, we'll get to what's kind of been the hot button issue so far this morning was his response, and I forget who asked the question yesterday about, hey, are there going to be any staff changes made this offseason? And the leading question being asked is what's going to happen with Terry Rooney, because this historically or statistically was the worst pitching staff that South Carolina has ever seen in the history of the program in terms of overall ERA. And again, Terry Rooney is the pitching coach. So yesterday when asked if there's going to be any staff changes, here was Coach Maneri's answer, starting off with Terry Rooney.
No, Terry Rooney is here to stay. He's an outstanding coach, great recruiter, great pitching coach. You do the best you can, and we'll get better. We need to. We had some young kids, I think, that showed flashes of being pretty good for us, and we're going to get some kids in recruiting, and we've got a couple freshmen coming in that I think are going to help us. And Terry Rooney is here to stay. He's not going anywhere. He's an outstanding coach, and he'll prove that as we go forward. And there won't be any other changes with our staff.
I get it. Terry's your dude. You guys have been at each other's sides forever, going back to your success at LSU, and you believe he's the best pitching coach in the entire country, or else you wouldn't have brought him in here this past offseason. That is the absolute wrong way to answer that question 10 minutes after you just had the worst season in program history since they've been in the SEC, at least. You say, okay, yeah, I get why you're asking me that question. Right now, we're taking into account everything that's happened. We're going to analyze everything this offseason. You don't have to say, yeah, I'm going to get a new pitching coach. You don't have to say, yeah, we're going to fire this guy or fire that guy. You just have to say there is no option that's not on the table to be examined this offseason. To say, again, right after the season ends, well, we're not going to make any staff changes. Why not? Have you really gone through and combed over every detail of this team to think that that's the best choice right now? I think that's a terrible answer to give right after the game's over.
This is the same guy who talked about how excited he was for the portal to open and get new players right 10 minutes after the season ended. So it's not surprising. Look, the arrogance is just reeking. It's been like this pretty much all year. And, the one thing I've said before, I think, is that I just feel there's a lack of ownership, responsibility for the problems. Like, I remember, again, going back to that first press conference, Paul literally said, blame him for all the problems. Don't blame it on the players. He can take it. He's a man, all that stuff. Yet all this season, I've heard constantly about, this being the problem or that being the problem, or there just wasn't enough talent. We're working the best with what we can. But it's not like this team was not talented. Again, he's the one who literally said this team's got some talent. Plays the intro video before every single game. So there's a major disconnect there, and I think it does start at the top with Paul and the issues that are going on there. Because I honestly just don't feel like there's enough responsibility of him taking the blame for some of this. Now, for him to go out there and just say that Rooney's not going anywhere, I understand it, like that's his guy and stuff, like you said, Tyler. But when you have the numbers that you have and how terrible the ERA is, and you're giving up double-digit runs 16 of your 57 games this year, that's 28% of the entire season right there.
Yeah.
How can you possibly think about running it back instantly like that? And he said there aren't going to be any other staff changes either. So it's just like, bringing in new players is one thing, but also we didn't see these guys get developed at all this year. The pitching staff regressed entirely across the board. So I just don't know if the same coaches being back is going to help this thing turn around necessarily.
And you mentioned, him talking about the talent so much this offseason or so much during the season, and that was something that really I think a lot of people noticed as the season went along is like, man, when he's talking about the issues with this team, a lot of the finger pointing is at the talent, not necessarily at the coaching staff. Which I guess is not surprising that he would say, hey, we're not going to make any changes this upcoming offseason. But I think about this from a fan perspective. And, yeah, again, you're going to go out there and you're going to get guys in the transfer portal and all this kind of stuff. But why, as a fan, am I going to think that things are going to be different this next upcoming season if you've not changed the structure of what you're doing from a philosophy standpoint when it comes to what you think about offense, what you think about the pitching staff, and the coach is obviously, in charge of that. And, again, I'm not sitting here calling for anybody's jobs, but again, you should at least be willing to examine every bit of this team to figure out what went wrong. And if you come to the conclusion that, hey, we need to make a change here with who's overseeing the pitching staff or who's overseeing the offense in Mine and Lee, if you think that's the best thing for the program, then do that. But again, that's not a decision you should be making 10 minutes after the season ends in the press conference.
You have to consider something needs to be different next year, whether it is someone not being here on staff next year or just an overall re-examining everything. Why didn't this season work is the biggest question I think needs to be answered. You have to go back and crunch the numbers, dive into what went wrong, and kind of just if you're Paul Mainieri sitting there, you kind of just have to ask yourself, did I do a good enough job this year? And the answer is simply no. And I think if you're him, you kind of have to look yourself in the mirror and kind of figure out, okay, this season did not go well. I need to make a change. And whether it's internally or just an overall difference in philosophy, like the walks, for instance. South Carolina walked more this year, but they also were a lot worse in many other offensive categories this season, hitting in general. So a lot of things to figure out, but I think Paul does need to kind of look and figure out, okay, what can he do different next year? Because he is the man at the top, obviously, that's going to be back next season.
We'll hear more from Coach Mainieri and his assessment of the season after yesterday's 11-3 loss to Florida in the opening round of the SEC tournament that ended what has now been South Carolina's worst season since it's been in the SEC. More of that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you on your Wednesday on the game.
This just in, AAA Heating and Air continues to dominate the Midlands with the best HVAC replacement options around. With guaranteed financing, 12 months, no payments or interest, and a 15-year parts and labor warranty, they're setting the standard for new system installations. But did you know they also have great deals on repairs? That's right. If your system is broken and you're strapped for cash, AAA Heating and Air can still help. They offer up to 12-month payment plans with no credit check required on repairs. That's right. So all you need is a valid bank account. That's it. So don't delay. Call AAA Heating and Air today. Whether it's a replacement or repair, they've got the deal you need.
Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Wednesday on the game as we continue to unpack what happened with South Carolina baseball as their season came to an end yesterday with their loss in the first round of the SEC tournament. Want to get back into what Coach Maneri had to say about yesterday and the season as a whole. He summed it up as being disappointed but not discouraged with what he saw.
Yeah, it was a tough year. I'm not used to these kind of seasons, quite frankly. And, it got off to a rough start when we lost what we thought was going to be our Friday night starter before the season began. And Eli Jersenbeck got hurt in preseason, and then shortly after that, Nolan Naraki, we thought would be our second baseman and hit a bunch of home runs. It was really never himself, and now he's had knee surgery. And then you look at Thomas LaCroix, who broke his thumb the second inning of the first game of the year, never really swung the bat the way that he could, and then when he hurt his hip, he was out for the year, and then, of course, the last month, without Petrie. So I'm not making excuses. It's just reality. We didn't have the depth to overcome some of those things. I'm an optimist by nature, and I thought, that we would have the, what it took to compete in this league. Obviously we didn't, the way the season went. But it hasn't, I'm disappointed but not discouraged. We're working really hard in recruiting. We've already lined up some really, really good players for next year through the junior college ranks. We have a few guys in the freshman class the previous staff had recruited that we're real excited about. And then we're anxious for the transfer portal to open on June 2nd. And we're obviously going to need a lot of players there. We've recruited already a really outstanding high school class of 2026. So I think the future is bright for our program. And, like I said, I'm disappointed about this year, but I'm not discouraged about the future. We're just going to keep rolling up our sleeves and working hard at it, and hopefully we're going to be a lot better next year.
So, obviously, there's going to be a lot of player movement in the offseason. As you said, the transfer portal ends up opening up on June the 2nd, only a couple days away. And look, they're going to get guys, like I said, from junior college. They've already got some guys. They've got some high school guys signed. They're going to get some guys from other programs around the country in the transfer portal. That's just how all this works. My concern comes with the fact that, again, if you're not going to make any changes on the coaching staff, I don't know if fundamentally speaking, this team's going to be any different. So you can change the players that you have. I don't know if it's going to give you a different result if you don't look inward and change something philosophically that you're doing this year.
And the other thing I think that needs to be thought about here, like, yes, they are going into JUCO and they are bringing in what seems like, honestly, a lot of pretty solid players. Like if Maneri has made it clear, he's looking for guys that throw hard and hit for power. Like seems like he's got some of those guys coming in next year, whether it's from high school or JUCO. My question is, and it's been like this for weeks now, how are you going? And he's made the point before about how he's going to do it, but how do you convince players to come play for you after the season you had? And I'm sure word of mouth is going to be out there with guys making their decisions because guys have friends everywhere, it seems, in college baseball. How easy is it going to be to just not only just flip a roster, but turn it into a contending type of roster, bringing in the players that you want to. So that, I think that, in itself with the season you've had and just, you could be a part of some guys to come to a program that you're probably joining a team that is most likely not going to be much better next year.
And I think what's going to be even more telling is who can you convince to come back? So, again, the transfer portal works both ways. Yeah, you're going to get some guys coming in. You're also going to get some guys leaving. And I think about kind of like four guys in particular. Your three freshmen that showed a lot of promise this year, KJ Scobie, Bo Hollins, and Gavin Braylon, as well as Jace Woida, who has another year of eligibility left, just to name a few. Those are four key guys that if you retain all four of those guys, fantastic, because all four of those guys have shown some degree of promise this year that gives you an idea that they could be key parts of your team, hopefully being better next year. But if you lose any of those guys, or specifically all four of those guys, I think you're in trouble. And I think are hard pressed to be able to retain all that talent for guys that are probably going to be pretty sought after by other teams, not only in this conference, but around the country when the portal opens.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, man. Like, how do we know these guys are happy? Number one, at South Carolina. Like, who's gonna be happy after a season like this? Number one, and what is going on internally? Are the guys happy with the coaches? Are they happy with how the season went? And probably not, honestly. But also, we have to consider, it's going to be the same thing like when Ethan Petcher is a freshman and doing the things he was doing. There are going to be schools out there, schools potentially with more money that maybe in the SEC that are going after these guys, trying to recruit them. Because what's to stop a guy like KJ Scobie, who is not from here? He's a Florida guy. What's to stop him from going to a school in his home state or going somewhere closer to home? You know what I mean? Like, yep. And there are a lot of the programs that are probably going to be recruiting these guys are in much better positions right now than South Carolina is. So that's another thing to kind of consider here.
Well, and don't think that these conversations aren't already happening. And when you're having a bad season like South Carolina had, it's not like these guys are waking up this morning saying, you know what, I think I'm going to go in the transfer portal. No, they've probably had their mind made up for a couple of weeks now, knowing what direction the season was heading, saying, all right, going to finish this out. Let's go through the motions here. And then as soon as the portal opens up, I'm hopping in it. So within the next 2 weeks, we're going to learn a lot about kind of the state of where everything is, depending on who leaves in the portal and who decides not to come back to play for Palmineri for another year.
Yeah, I think this roster is going to just look vastly different next season. I don't think many of these guys are going to want to come back, honestly. And I think at the same time, I think the coaching staff is going to be willing to part ways with a lot of these players and get their own roster in here. And we'll see what kind of difference that makes. But again, development is key, and it has to be better than it was this year, because if you're not able to develop, you're just going to get a team that was kind of like the one this year.
Yeah, and again, when you go back to what he said about not making any coaching staff changes, does that mean you're going to go into next year with the exact same philosophy that you had this year that didn't work? Or is Palmineri willing to look himself in the mirror and saying, hey, here's what I thought was going to work, here's what we need to change to be better next year? Or is he just firmly going to believe that his way is the best way and switching up the talent is going to make that better?
That's the main thing I'm concerned about, is what you said right there. Is he willing to put his pride aside, his ego, and kind of just look at this thing for what it is and examine the facts of the matter? This team was not good enough this year to compete, and there are so many problems. Can he figure out a way to just say, hey, I need to adjust, I need to get better with the times, and my way is not working this year, so let's try to change this thing? Because that honestly is probably something that does need to be considered for sure.
In coming towards the end of the season, I had a thought about this team that I want to share coming up next that I feel like is a pretty apt comparison when we're talking about a program that used to be at the top of college baseball that has now fallen to rock bottom. I'll share that coming up next, because I think a lot of people will agree with this comparison to a particular football program that's also seen better days in years past. With that coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you, breaking down this disastrous baseball season on your Wednesday here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry with you here on your Wednesday on the game, continuing to unpack the historically bad season for South Carolina baseball. 6-24 in conference play. I guess 6-25 if you want to count yesterday's loss in the SEC tournament as well. You add let's count this up. Against Power 4 competition, you technically went 6-29 with the 3 losses to Clemson and the loss to North Carolina in the midweek game. And no way to slice it. That's bad. Congratulations, you beat all the non-conference teams out of the mid-majors in all those games. That only does so much, right? When you play tougher competition in the SEC, you got to be able to hold your own. And unfortunately, South Carolina was not able to do that.
Yep. Again, you went under 500 overall this season, the second time that's happened in the last 4 seasons. You lost the most games in a single season ever. You lost the most SEC games and finished with the worst SEC record in program history. It's just there were so many program lows this year that you're making history for all the wrong reasons. And the fact that this all happened in year 1 with a new coach, this was a team that was not that bad last year, and they got significantly worse this season.
So as this season was coming to an end, I was trying to think of an apt comparison for where South Carolina baseball is as of right now. And one thing I kept coming back to was, man, this is starting to remind me a lot of Nebraska football. Follow me here. So for both Nebraska football and South Carolina baseball, they were both once the standard of their respective sports. Nebraska football won 3 national championships over 4 years in the 90s. South Carolina won 2 national championships and played for a third in 3 consecutive years in the early 2010s. Both programs hired what seemed like the perfect young head coach that didn't live up to expectations. Scott Frost never made a bowl in his 2 years at Nebraska. Chad Holbrook, of course, was on Ray Tanner's staff and missed the NCAA tournament twice with no College World Series appearances, coming off the heels of those 3 straight years of a lot of success. Both programs experienced prolonged periods of good but not great play. Bo Pelini averaged 9 wins over 7 years at Nebraska. Between Chad Holbrook and Mark Kingston, they made 7 NCAA tournaments, 4 Super Regionals, and no College World Series since Ray Tanner retired. And both programs have hired a rebuilder that the jury is still currently out on. Matt Rule is 12-13 in 2 seasons at Nebraska, and Coach Maneri, of course, just had the worst season in the history of this program's time in the SEC. So, I don't know. Seems pretty similar to me.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. That's a great comparison, number one. So good job on that. But yeah, look, this is way worse than I think anyone could have imagined the first year with a new head coach going. I mean, you talk about Mark Kingston and Chad Holbrook being bad at times. And look, those guys, at least to their credit, and it's only year 1 with Paul, so things can change next year. Those guys made it to both those guys actually made it to Super Regionals in their first seasons with the program. They were highly successful. Mark Kingston and Chad Holbrook, put it this way, were both 1 win away from going to Omaha when they took over in their first years at South Carolina. Paul Maneri was nowhere near close to that. So, and those guys were working with talent, obviously, and so was this team. But they underperformed drastically this season, and it leads to an offseason where you have so many questions to answer. It's not just the roster you got to figure out. Again, we talked about before. It's the philosophy. It's the coaching staff. It's just everything needs to be probably put under the microscope and reassessed, because everything you did this year was just simply not good enough, and it cannot be the same exact way next year. Otherwise, you're kind of just setting yourself up for the same exact thing to happen.
And unfortunately, again, kind of alluding to my point about this being like Nebraska football, you've gotten to the point where when people talk about the success of South Carolina baseball, it's all in a past tense, right? And last week, a week ago today exactly, was when the In Spirit documentary aired on the SEC Network, recapping, the 2 national championship teams and the obviously, 2 little kids that were, the cancer patients that are obviously a big part of, the rallying of those teams and kind of being mascots and helping those teams along the way and all that kind of stuff. Great job, by the way. Phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out on the, the SEC Network and the ESPN app. But when you think about it, okay, that those teams were now 13 years in the past when we're talking about the last national championship, or excuse me, the 14 years in the past. We're talking about the last national championship team back in 2011. Then the next year, you obviously played for the national championship and came up short in that one. So when you're thinking about like this upcoming freshman class of guys that are going to be 18 years old in the spring of 2026, they were what, 4 or 5 the last time you won a national championship? Like the current crop of players, most of them don't know you as a power in college baseball. They can hear the stories. Maybe their parents tell them about that, but they, with their own eyes, at least cognitively being able to remember it, don't know you as the standard of college baseball anymore because it's been that long since you've been at the top.
And I think the one thing that we need to think about here, and you kind of mentioned it with the aura of what this program used to be, because one, these kids don't remember that stuff since they're not our age. These are kids that are 17, 16, 18 years old that you're recruiting out of high school most likely, and some in JUCO that barely would remember any of this stuff unless they're just lifelong Gamecock fans, right? So I think that's one thing to think about here. The other thing to kind of think about, and I think it's lost its I think glamour a little bit, pizzazz a little bit, is the idea of playing for Paul Mainieri, this historically winning head coach, national championship, so many SEC titles, so much success throughout his career. Well, that worked last year. And when I spoke to a bunch of these guys that committed last year, that was always the main thing that was brought up, is that, hey, I get to play for Paul Mainieri, who won so many games and stuff, and he's done this and that and all that. That's great. I understand that. It'd be different. It'd be the same way this year if things went well, and even more heightened on the fact that, yeah, South Carolina's got a good program here. The fact of the matter is that charm is kind of, I think, weared off a little bit, and we'll see how that looks this summer when talking to different guys that commit and stuff. But I think you lose a little bit of that touch of, you can't really fall back on the fact that Paul Mainieri's a winner. Yes, that still is the case, but he also went through the worst season in program history. So there's a lot that comes with kind of explaining how to fix that. And Paul's talked about before, you just got to be a part of the turnaround, essentially, is the main message. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to cut it, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I think a lot of people give you the benefit of the doubt in your first year, especially with the resume that Paul Mainieri had, where, people say, okay, well, this guy's been there. He's won a national championship, knows what it's like to get home on all those kind of things. And I don't quite want to equate it to like the Saban discounted Alabama, where, hey, Alabama may not have always been the best when it came to NIL, but people wanted to play for Saban because they knew they could A, play for national championships, and B, get themselves to the NFL. But if you kind of looked at Paul Mainieri the same way by saying, well, hey, we don't know what he's going to be like when he comes back to college baseball, but I think he's going to be pretty good given what he's done in the past. I think you lost a lot of that respect just by what happened in this 1 year. It's where a lot of players analyzing South Carolina now, coming out of the transfer portal or coming out of the high school ranks, saying, yeah, he's had that success, but I don't like what I've seen since he's come back. I don't know if he can get me where I need to be in terms of getting back, or in terms of playing for a national championship, or potentially getting me to the pros himself.
Yeah, and again, I think there is a way to rectify this, right? Like, again, Paul, I think it is possible to see this thing through, that there can be success, because, we've talked all show long about how much doom and gloom there has been around the program this year. But there is a way for this thing to be successful. It's just, I think, again, you have to look yourself in the mirror and kind of figure out, okay, what went wrong and how do we fix it? And how do we adjust with the times? That needs to happen. But if you bring in talented players and you're able to develop them to the level that they can be even better than they currently are, then I think you have a recipe for success here. But again, it's not some simple fix. It's going to take a lot of figuring out how do we turn this thing around from top to bottom in order to get the program back on track, and convincing players that, hey, this thing can work out. It can be better down the road here.
We'll get to some of your thoughts and your feelings coming away from South Carolina's rough end of the season as the year one of the Paul Mainieri era has officially come to an end. That's coming up next is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Wednesday on the game, talking all things Gamecock baseball as year one of the Maneri era ends with the 11-3 loss in the first round of the SEC tournament. I want to get some of your thoughts, 803-404-6100, as well as on the live stream on the Game TV. You can check us out. Sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. So I title the live stream every single day something related to what we're going to talk about. And today, as I came in and set up for the show, the title of today's episode is It's Finally Over, obviously alluding to the baseball team. It's a title that took all of 3 seconds to come up with as I'm in the transition from the extra point or the early game ending to starting the extra point. Well, JD on the live stream has taken issue with that, thinking that that is some kind of shot at the players. I just want to tell you that it's not. It's talking about the entire season as a whole, and he seems to think that we've taken issue with the players more than the coaching staff. That couldn't be further from the truth. Now, I will say this, and I said this on the live stream as well. When you have a season as bad as this one is, nobody is absolved from blame. Coaching staff, players, administration, everybody should have some kind of finger pointed at them. But I think we've been pretty consistent in putting more of the blame on the coaching staff. And if anything, Coach Maneri is the one that has consistently thrown his own players under the bus and not pointed enough of a finger at his coaching staff, going to the fact yesterday by saying, we're not going to fire Terry Rooney. We're not going to make any changes to the coaching staff. It's going to be the exact same. We're just going to go out there and get different players. So if anything, I think your anger should be directed at the coaches more than us when it comes to being critical of the players.
We haven't used the word players in a negative light yet, I don't think, on this hour here, which, look, how much of a player problem was it this year? Well, look, there were times, obviously, where guys just were getting hit around pitching, and the offense wasn't able to always come through. There were obvious issues with that. But again, I think that all goes back to, okay, there was talent on this team, right? So why is every single player, it feels like, gotten significantly worse this year? You can only say there are a few guys on this team that you feel like were really, really good this year. Nathan Hall, Ethan Petrie, Bo Hollins, KJ Scobie, mostly hitters. Mm-hmm. Parker Marlott was pretty good this year, and Ashton Crowther at times was pretty good this year.
Sure.
But besides that, I can't confidently say that I felt like, yeah, these guys were all great and stuff. But I think that all goes back to the point of development and the fact that a lot of guys just really regressed hard this season.
And again, we have not spent a lot of time blaming the players, but at the same time, and this goes back to JD's comment here, we are talking about college athletes who are now getting paid to play at this level. So it's not like we're talking about middle schoolers, right? Where you're saying, okay, well, don't go after, some 13-year-old kid. Like, these guys, they're adults now. Like, they are not absolved from blame if they deserve to be blamed. Again, I'm not putting as much blame on them. Everybody is guilty to some degree. It's more on the coaching staff than the players here. But I think the attitude of, well, you can't point fingers at college players, I think that's gone out the window at this point because we're way past that in today's world of college sports.
Again, finger pointing, probably everyone is involved in this. This is not just Paul Maneri and that's it. Like, he is to blame for a lot of this because he's the head coach, but this is kind of an everyone problem. This is from top to bottom, the administration, the players, the coaches. But at the end of the day, a lot of the blame does go on the coaches because they are the ones that most of these players may not have been recruited by this staff, but they are the ones that have been working with them every day since the summer last year. And these are the results that we've seen.
Quickly, as we wrap up the hour here, and you got your long drive back to Columbia coming up later today, do you know how many miles you've put on your car this baseball season?
Gosh. And keep in mind, I have a new truck. So I definitely, baseball season, I've driven 3 cars this year.
Okay.
I would say, gosh, dude, I don't even know. Definitely at least probably like 3,000-4,000 miles probably.
And how many sad dog photos have you had to post over the course of this entire year?
God, dude, probably at least like 150. Like, if I had to guess, man, this has been a long season, and so I'm glad I don't post anymore.
For context, anytime something goes wrong for the Gamecocks, we see a picture of your dog. That's something that Colin Taylor used to do with Wrigley when he was covering the team. It's tradition that you've continued on, and I appreciate that. But yes, if you see a picture of Jack's dog on the timeline, that means something's gone bad for South Carolina.
Yeah, let's hope I don't have to use those many more going forward into football season or anything. But yeah, just it's a lot of miles, a lot of dog photos, but still a lot of good times this season. I am glad we're heading into the off season now in the summer.
Well, safe travels on the way back. We'll get you back here tomorrow, and you don't have to hit the road for a little bit now that the season's finally over.
Yeah, man. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again. This is a good show.
That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up next in hour number 2, Jalen Tart Hobson with me. We'll continue the baseball conversation here on the game. Tyler Head here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. I tell you about it all the time, but I'll remind you once again, you always need to be mindful of things going on around your home, especially if you start to notice things that are a little bit odd. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors or windows that might be sticking, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these issues with your home, you could have serious foundation problem. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com. They will send a professional out to your home to evaluate your foundation issues and get them fixed so you and your family can live without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. 10 o'clock. Welcome back in hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Jalen's Hart joining me as he does each and every Wednesday. Well, not last Wednesday. I was not here.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you and Terry had a good time hanging out.
We had a ball last Wednesday, and we were talking about, we were guessing what you were wanting to bring back, knowing that you was in Nashville. We were just guessing. We was like, I wonder if he's going to bring back anything NASCAR related, and apparently off air you didn't bring anything NASCAR related.
I'm not like a big souvenir-y type of person. Like,
Okay.
I'll buy T-shirts, I'll buy hats, those kind of things. But
Okay.
like trinkets are not really like my. Like we bought like went to the Country Music Hall of Fame, and we bought
Okay.
like a coffee mug that has like the engravement on it. But like outside of that, I don't really know unless somebody asks for something. Like, hey, when you're going to this thing, bring me back this. Like, sure, I'll do that. But like, I don't know what people like when it comes to trinkets, so I typically avoid buying those. By the way, Nashville is very expensive as it was, so I didn't spend a whole lot on like merchandise type of things. It was more about experiences when I was there.
So I've never been to Nashville. Terry told me last week he's never been to Nashville. That's like one of his places on his bucket list that he wants to go.
I would highly recommend. Again, it's pricey, so be prepared for that. But a lot of fun things to do downtown.
Cool.
Again, if you like country music Hall of Fame, there's a couple things we didn't even get a chance to get to. Went to the Grand Ole Opry. That was cool. So, if you get the opportunity, I recommend going. If you enjoy the nightlife and bars and that kind of stuff, it's a great place and tons of great food and all those kind of things. So, I enjoyed it. I had fun.
Do you see yourself living there?
No, not living there.
Okay,
I think it's one of those things that like visiting's fun, and
Cool.
we're definitely going to go back because there were more things we didn't get a chance to do while we were there for a couple of days last week. But no, I don't have a desire to live there necessarily.
Cool. I'm glad you had a good time, bro, and had was able to see a lot of things.
Yep.
For me, depending upon where I go, I am a big souvenir guy, so I can have a piece of where I went with
Sure.
me. But in terms of like coffee mugs and stuff, I have to have something that's gonna
I'm more of like a picture type of person.
Okay.
I'm the same way when it comes to like I'm not a huge autograph person. When it comes to like meeting athletes or famous people, like I'd rather have a picture with somebody than them scribble on a hat or something like that. Like that's fine if that's your thing. That's not for me. So I'm more of like I'd rather see the pictures and like be able to kind of relive whatever I saw or whatever I experienced there, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to go buy this, postcard or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm kind of like you. I am a T-shirt, hat, anything that I can touch.
Yeah.
Is something that I would have, as a memorabilia of a state that I go to.
Speaking of T-shirts, what was the fit last week with Terry? You had your run of old school.
It was
music
a Tribe Called
T-shirts.
Quest. It was
Okay.
a Tribe Called Quest. I
Nice.
had to. So today, I wanted to pay homage to Radio Hofstra University, WRHU 88.7 FM out of Long Island, New York.
Nice.
They had a graduation on Sunday. So congrats all to all the graduates from Hofstra. Go Hofstra Pride. So I wanted to pay homage to my graduate school today.
Very, very cool. It is graduation season. Congratulations to everybody that is graduating. I think most of the college graduations have ended at this point, but you got like high school stuff.
Yeah.
I imagine coming up this weekend. I have no perception for school calendars anymore now that I've graduated. Like I'll see, a couple weeks ago when South Carolina was having their graduation, I saw the people as I was leaving walking around, in their caps and gowns and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I guess it's college graduation time, which makes sense. It's early May. But congratulations to everyone out there graduating, whatever level of school you're at. And if you're like me, you're glad that school is done with.
It hit me yesterday. I was getting something to eat, some breakfast yesterday at a restaurant, and the restaurants were all packed, and the wait times were so long. I'm like, man, I forgot it was graduation season, so it kind of hit me then. So yeah, congrats to all the graduates that are graduating, both college, grad school, doctoral, and high school.
Obviously, graduation always a happy time, no matter what level you're graduating from. Unfortunately, what's not a happy time is what is happening with South Carolina baseball. We've been unpacking it all morning. The season came to an end yesterday, 11-3 loss in the opening round of the SEC tournament, losing to Florida, and ending what is now the worst season, record-wise, in the history of this program in the SEC. Pitching staff, worst ERA in program history. The list goes on and on. Like, it's bad no matter which way you slice it. And the unfortunate thing about this season, and this set in halfway through SEC play, really was apathy with the fan base, right? Like, it's one thing to be disappointed. It's another thing to stop caring. And I think you saw this past weekend when LSU came down, the number one team in the country, the team that Paul Mainieri once coached himself to a national championship. Founders Park was full of LSU fans. Like, there was a handful of Gamecock fans there, but not many, because the season had been so bad, people stopped caring. That's a dangerous thing when your fan base just literally feels like it's not worth their time to watch you or go out and see you in person anymore.
I mean, that's a bad recipe for disaster. As the leader of the team, Paul Mainieri, you're the one that's trying to gather the people around to see what product you're going to put on the diamond. And what you saw, I mean, yes, they did win the first game against LSU, but for me personally watching that game, there was no one in the fans. Every time they would hit a ball, foul ball, base hit, whatever, there was no one in the stands other than LSU fans. And to me, that's embarrassing just to see that. But I'm guessing fans are now singing the Hallelujah, Hallelujah song today, knowing that the season is over. But looking forward, what's next? I mean, how much worse can this get? There were some season lows where you only won 6 games in the conference and you only won 6 games in the non-conference. And most of your wins were coming from mid-major schools that, by far, they were also close games that they could have lost to, but they managed to squeak out and win. I'm just concerned of the direction of where this is going to go. I wouldn't be shocked if the athletic director would sit down with Mainieri and let him go. But I wouldn't be shocked as well is if he stays for another year.
Well,
but he would, to me, he would be on the hot seat just looking in.
And what we've learned, and Mainieri said it himself, and the people that cover the program very closely have also reported there's not going to be any change made. Like, Mainieri is going to get a year number 2. And you talk about the relief that people have that, oh, well, the season's finally over. I don't know how much of a relief that it is when you know that, A, the coach is coming back, and 2, going back to yesterday when he's talking about, hey, we're not going to make any staff changes, despite the fact that, again, as I mentioned, you had the worst ERA in program history from your pitching staff. Your offense took a step back this year, compared to last season with the same coach over the hitting and minor league. Like, the fact that you're not willing to make any kind of changes, that to me stifles the optimism for next season. Because, look, whenever you have a bad year in whatever sport, a lot of negativity comes away directly as the season ends. But as the offseason goes along and, you get players to the transfer portal, people start getting excited and built up for the next year. But I don't know, when we're sitting in here in early February of next year, previewing 2026, I don't know how high that optimism goes because, again, you weren't willing to make any kind of changes to your staff after a historically bad season.
And to make no changes in your coaching staff is kind of alarming, too, from a player's perspective and from a fan's perspective, because as fans, we want to see Carolina go back to the glory days of 2010, 2011, 2012, from what we saw with the SEC Story series on SEC Network, ESPN+. Please go check that out. That was a really good series, by the way. But it's just odd. I mean, for you to not make a coaching change now, I mean, I feel like it should be some adjustments going in to give some fans some hope going into the next season, to where it's like, okay, this can't get any worse or be the same of what we saw this past season, right? ?
Yeah. So baseball season comes to an end. Fortunately, softball's still going.
Yes.
They will play in the Super Regional this upcoming weekend, taking on UCLA. First game on Friday at 1 o'clock, which you can watch on ESPN2. And as we've talked about a lot, the success of Ashley Chastain Woodard in year number 1 with South Carolina softball program ends up making baseball look a lot worse by comparison, because both baseball and softball made coaching changes a year ago.
Yes.
For programs that were good but not great. Like, again, baseball was in a regional a year ago. Softball was consistently making regionals. That wasn't terrible, but it wasn't excellent. And they made the changes they did, bringing in coaches that they thought could elevate them to the next level. And obviously, Coach Chastain Woodard has done a really good job putting South Carolina in position. If they win 2 games this weekend, they'll be back in Oklahoma City for the first time in almost 30 years. And again, Coach Mainieri ends up taking the program several steps back to where it was a year ago, just being in regional.
And nobody saw this coming at all. We were all eyes in on baseball with Paul Mainieri's stature and status of him getting to Omaha at LSU, but we weren't so sure with the softball team coming out this year. When they went on those runs and beat Duke in the non-conference schedule part of the season, and then went on their run in the regular season and plus the SEC tournament to get this bid, then you look at the postseason and what they did last weekend, where they were able to win the games that they were supposed to, take care of the business at home, and now they're playing a true contender in UCLA, which is no scrub. But I am very confident that they can get this done and get their way back to Oklahoma.
Yesterday or the other day, we learned that 5 players were named to the all-region team from this past weekend. You had Ari Rohde, Brooke Blankenship, and Knight, Gress and Hurd also as well. Jory Hurd also ends up being the all-regional MVP for her performance. I believe 8 2/3 innings, only 1 hit over the course of the weekend there. And again, you turn your attention this weekend to UCLA, and again, a program that historically is great, right? And they're one of the best offenses in all of softball this upcoming year, so your work's going to be cut out for you. But again, you are the higher seed. You are hosting this weekend, and hopefully that plays to South Carolina's advantage.
I think so, too. It's going to come down to Blankenship and Knight, who has been phenomenal the last week in their games. But I think it also comes down to pitching as well, with Grease, having a very phenomenal game, and Jory Hurd, who has been coming onto the scene quite often as well. If you get contributions from those players to have a team effort, I think you're going to have a chance to knock off one of the best teams in the country in the Bruins of UCLA.
And again, that coming up, first pitcher Friday at 1 o'clock over at Beckham Field, which you can watch on ESPN2. Saturday's game will be at 1 o'clock as well, and Game 3, if necessary, a to-be-determined time coming up on Sunday. And again, the winner of this series will go on to the Softball World Series out there in Oklahoma City the week after that. We've talked a lot of baseball, obviously some softball now. I want to switch things up a little bit. Move on to the NFL coming up next, because yesterday the owners' meetings took place, and we got some significant rulings on some future things when it comes to the sport and the Olympics as well, including flag football. We'll discuss that coming up next, and what that means for the NFL and what exactly this is going to look like as we move to 2028 and the Summer Olympics coming to Los Angeles. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart hanging out with you on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Ed, Jalen Tart with you on your Wednesday here on the game. We'll have more baseball discussion to happen as the morning rolls along, especially with Wes and Chris coming up in the 11 o'clock hour. But we'll switch gears a little bit for the time being. Yesterday, the NFL owners met and voted on a couple of different things, namely the tush-push seedings with the NFL playoffs. But one thing that caught a lot of people's attention as well is the potential involvement for NFL players with flag football as it comes to the 2028 Olympics, which will be held in Los Angeles. And again, we knew this was going to be a part of the Olympics for a while now. We didn't know if the league was going to okay their players to be a part of it. We now know that is going to be the case, which for one is very exciting. I caution people, though, to pump the brakes a little bit because I don't know if this is going to look exactly the way we think it's going to look. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like it, but I think, too, I'm kind of cautious as well as what are you going to do in terms of the season now with this being a green light for the owners to green light their players to participate. I like it. Immediately when I saw this, I was like, okay, Justin Jefferson is in. Tyreek Hill is in. There's just no way about that. Quarterback-wise, I don't know who would be the quarterback. I don't know how this would work. But just immediately off the top of my head, I was like, this couldn't be anything. No one could represent the country in this type of sport than Justin Jefferson because he has openly said, I want in on this.
Well, I think it's also interesting from the standpoint that that's 3 years away. So
yes.
We don't know we have an idea of who the stars are going to be, but there could be names we're not even aware of right now that could take the league by storm in the next 3 years that we're saying, oh, that guy should definitely be on the Olympic team for 2028. But yesterday's resolution established a couple things. Go in order here. Permission for any NFL player under contract to participate in tryouts. A limit of one NFL player per team on each national team participating. So, again, you have players that are from different countries, Canada and stuff like that can go play for their respective home countries. Allowing, in addition, a team's designated international player to play for his home country. There you go. A purchase of league-wide insurance policies to provide injury protection for any player injured while participating in the Olympic flag football. A salary cap for any player who is injured. An expectation that flag football teams will establish medical staffs and field services that comply with NFL minimum standards, and a schedule that does not unreasonably conflict with an NFL players' league and club commitments. And that's kind of where I want to start here because, again, the Olympics take place in July and August of 2028. So you're talking about roughly a month before the NFL season starts. There's obviously a lot of team activities going on that seemingly these players would be exempt from because they'd be competing for the country, on this flag football team. This is a little bit different to me than like basketball and hockey, right? Which are national sports that we see teams be compiled to represent the country. Obviously, the USA basketball team once again winning gold last year, and you had Steph and LeBron and tons of superstars participating ahead of the NBA season. Football's a little bit different here because, again, you're talking about right before the season starts, and I know this is obviously flag football, but injuries are still very possible.
Yes.
And while this opens up the door for Patrick Mahomes and Justin Jefferson, all these huge names to participate and represent the country, if I'm the Chiefs, though, do I want Patrick Mahomes playing in this essential exhibition? Yes, it's for the Olympics, but it has no presiding over the NFL season that I pay him millions upon millions of dollars to play in and lead my team to Super Bowls. Do I want to risk him potentially getting injured before the season starts, or Justin Jefferson, or if, Travis Hunter ends up being a superstar and all these kind of things? I don't know how willing NFL teams are going to be to let their top-end superstars participate in this right before the season starts.
I think it will be a mixture of starters and backups probably getting those type of roles to participate. Now, like you said, it's 3 years away. We don't really know what the status of the players are going to be in 3 years, of where they'll be, either, them being a superstar or them not panning out in the NFL. But to have one representative from the NFL team, I mean, we don't even know how many spots are going to be guaranteed.
I think a roster would be about 12 players because, again, flag football is like 5-on-5.
Yes.
Right? And that you don't have like interior offensive linemen and those kind of things. So it'd be very limited on which players would have the opportunity to join these teams. So I think you'd carry a roster of about 12, so like 2 quarterbacks, a couple running backs, a couple receivers, a couple DBs, linebacker, that kind of stuff. So it's a small list that, again, you'd have to try out for. It's not like, hey, we're just going to look and say, all right, this player had the best stats at quarterback, so he's going to be our quarterback. You'd still have to try out and be selected by the Olympic team, whoever's coaching it, to be a part of it. But again, especially for some of these high-end players, I don't know if their respective teams are going to be okay with them saying, you know what, yeah, go ahead and skip out on camp or whatever, go play in the Olympics and risk injury right before the season starts.
Yeah, that is a cost and a risk that players are not willing to take. But, you know, and I kind of fear for a team that may have a star player on the Super Bowl that year to come right off of a Super Bowl exhausting playoff win and then having to go across the country, across the world to, I mean, they're going to L.A.
Yeah, it'd be
it's in L.A., but in an event that this is still going on, every 4 years is going to be in another country. So I'm thinking about it from a long-term perspective, and the injuries do play a part because you can't really – injuries are very unpredictable here. And we want the players to be healthy, but it is a risk that if this was me, I would not take it. I mean, it looks cool, but if I'm worrying about this long, exhausting season, I'm not going to be willing to take it. But I like that this idea is presented to the players, though.
I do know one thing. Regardless of if Patrick Mahomes and Justin Jefferson and whoever the top stars of the NFL in 2028 are, this is going to get a lot of views, right?
Yes.
Like, we love anything football related, and even if it's not the biggest stars of the NFL, if we know there are NFL players playing in this thing, the ratings on NBC are going to be insane. Like, obviously, Olympic basketball is kind of the king when it comes to ratings because, again, we know the superstars that are playing in this is not a bunch of amateurs that we don't know their names of. Like, we want to see LeBron, want to see Steph, want to see these guys playing on the U.S. Olympic team. I think it's going to be the same kind of deal regardless of which NFL players it is. The fact that we know the names of these guys participating, it's going to drive a lot of viewership for NBC.
And is it just NFL players? Is it UFL players? Is it?
No, that is a strong possibility.
So that could be something too.
And again, flag football, like there is already like a U.S. flag football team like that. It competes in world events right now. And I remember when this was announced that this was going to be part of the Olympics, like the captain or whatever expressed his anger that there was this assumption it's all just going to be NFL players. Like there are actual legitimate flag football players that are also going to have a chance to be on this team too. So I don't necessarily know if it's going to be all NFL players or not because the skill set or the way you play flag football is obviously a little bit different than the way you play football in the NFL. So what makes somebody really good at tackling people may not constitute to grabbing a flag of somebody as well. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that it's all going to be just stud NFL players, you know, compiling these rosters. There could be some surprises, maybe from a UFL, maybe from the already established flag football team that maybe that no-name player that could be on the roster. But I do think there's going to be a fair amount of NFL talent on these teams. Again, the decision yesterday by the owners is opening up the possibility of this happening.
And I think we're probably going to see a sample size of them. Patrick Mahomes, I don't see him participating in this, knowing that he has an injury, prone history with his ankles.
I'm sure he'd love to.
He would,
again,
yeah.
Like, you have a chance to win a gold medal in an inaugural event in the Olympics. Like, that'd be cool.
That'd be awesome.
Again, are the Chiefs willing to let him do it is my question.
With him being the franchise player for the Chiefs, I'm not so sure. But if he wants to do it and he is interested, has a high interest, let's give him a shot. See what he does, in the next month at the Olympics in LA.
Regardless of which NFL players end up on these teams, does it almost seem like a foregone conclusion that America's probably going to win, like the gold medal, maybe like Canada's in second?
I don't know.
There are international players as well in the NFL that can represent other countries, but much like in basketball, just the talent depth is so deep in the U.S., I don't know if other countries are going to be able to compete necessarily.
I think it will be a smaller sample size because not all of the Olympic sports have a lot of draw, like what we see with basketball, like what we see with tennis, with swimming. We're not going to really get a small sample. I mean, we see a lot of football in the U.S. and Canada, but I'm very interested to see what other countries are going to participate in this and what players do they have because that might give them the exposure to to perhaps or for their players to get potential NFL contracts, UFL contracts, you name it. They may make a name for themselves as well with this exposure as well.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. Again, that coming up in 2028, a lot of time between now and then to figure out what exactly this is going to look like, and again, see which NFL teams are okay with their potential superstars going off and competing in this before the 2028 NFL season does get started. We'll switch gears a little bit, talk about a little racing coming up next with Jen Jensen. The early game, she'll be off to the Indianapolis 500 this upcoming weekend. We'll talk plenty about that and more from the NASCAR world as well as the Extra Point rolls along on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrod along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We'll get into some racing in just a moment. But quickly, it is time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Last night, game one of the Western Conference Finals. Timberwolves fall to the Oklahoma City Thunder 114-88 in game one of the series. Thunder only shoot 35% from the field to the 50% from Oklahoma City. We'll get a little bit more into that game and the NBA playoffs coming up in just a couple of minutes. But the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team that sprung a leak for this week's Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. It is now time to switch gears over to some racing. And Jen Jensen from the early game joining me now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. It is truly the best weekend in racing coming up. We've got, starting things off Sunday morning, the Monaco Grand Prix for F1, the Coke 600 for NASCAR, the Indy 500 for IndyCar, and then the Coke 600 for NASCAR wrapping up the day. And you'll be once again out there at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was actually looking this morning at a map on, how to get to the track and all that, which getting to the track usually, it's slow at times because 350,000 of your closest friends joining you, so sometimes traffic can be a little hairy, but that's usually not the biggest issue. It's leaving. So as I mentioned to you before, please let them get that fixed. But I'm super excited about the race. Lots of drama, having a rookie on the pole, just all really cool stuff on tap.
We'll get into some of that specifics here in just a moment. Do have to look back this past weekend, though, for NASCAR. Again, it was an off weekend from a points racing standpoint. They did run the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. Christopher Bell muscling his way past Joey Logano in the last handful of laps there to pick up his first career All-Star win. And we got treated, and I know we're kind of defaulted to thinking the short tracks aren't going to be very good, but one of the better short track races of the next-gen era. One that, again, allowed for a lot of passing. You had a good battle for the lead there at the very end. And overall, I was pretty pleased coming away from that race.
And that was one of the best races I've seen in a really long time. And, with the repave and stuff, as more drivers have been on there, more racing has been happening. They've been able to expand the lanes. And, you had three-wide racing at times, and it was just a lot of fun. Plenty of passes. I think the numbers I saw, there were something like 59 green flag passes or something and about 18 lead changes. I mean, how fantastic is that for fans?
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. Fox Sports, in talking to a couple of different drivers after the race, literally asked the question, hey, what do you think about a points race here? And that track is overseen by Speedway Motorsports, the same company that owns Charlotte Motor Speedway and Bristol and Atlanta and all those kind of places. And, they'd be the one to be able to pull that trigger and make that happen. And I'm thinking that's a real possibility. For the first time, it'd be fitting 30 years after the track closed down for the first time that North Wilkesboro may return to being a points-paying event coming up in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's a very distinct possibility. I mean, I know then you have to consider, okay, who comes off of a weekend or whatever. But when you see that the fan responses, the driver responses, there's only positives that I've heard about this. And it's, literally just an hour north of Charlotte. So people could do a weekend. I mean, I don't know what all is in the area of North Wilkesboro, but you've got a lot of possibilities of entertainment for the weekend, both in that vicinity.
I'll say I can do without the promoter's caution, though. I thought, and Michael Waltrip ends up dropping the flag as well. I just thought that was a little too goofy for my interest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had to laugh because that's such a Michael Waltrip thing. Obviously, he didn't do it on purpose, but I think any guests who wave flags, they probably should be tethering it to their hands. But, and the timing of it I thought was kind of stinky. To me, it was too late, but yet I understand that they were probably trying to build some intrigue and all of that. But I didn't care for it.
Yeah, and look, I get the All-Star race has always been rife with gimmicks, but that's one that I hope does not make the return in 2026, or wherever the All-Star race, ends up being. But now looking ahead to Indy this upcoming weekend, as you mentioned, you'll obviously be out there. And Sunday before the All-Star race, we got what I think is one of the most exciting days in all of motorsports, that being the final qualification day for the Indy 500. You obviously have bump day where you're deciding who the final cars into the field are going to be. A lot of drama there, at the very end with Rinus VeeKay and Zach Abel. But the big story comes in the pole sitter for the first time in a very long time. Rookie Robert Schwartz sitting on the pole with Prima Racing, their first ever entry into the Indy 500, and then go out there and beat the top dogs like Penske, like Ganassi, like McLaren, and Robert Schwartzman will be leading the team to the green flag coming up on Sunday.
And what is so fascinating with this is until he went to Indy, he had not driven on an oval track.
That's crazy too, right?
Yeah. So to be able to master that so quickly, to have the speed that he did and the self-control, I'm so impressed, and I've enjoyed watching him and listening to his interviews. I think he has so much enthusiasm, and I'm going to be rooting for him to do well for sure. Obviously, I'd like to see Kyle Larson to do well. I have a couple other favorites, but it'll be curious to see how he can handle the entire race.
Well, he's going to have the best view coming to the green flag. Two drivers that are going to have the worst view include Joseph Newgarden and Will Power, of course, of Team Penske, as they did not get an opportunity to set their final time on Sunday, as they were penalized for some illegal modifications to the back of the car. Of course, Team Penske is the predominant team in IndyCar. Roger Penske owns not only the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but the IndyCar Series as a whole now. And then, unfortunately, this is not the first time that Team Penske's gotten in trouble. Last year, they got in trouble with the push-to-pass stuff at St. Pete that ended up costing Joseph Newgarden to win there. So, it's never a good thing when a team is caught up in a cheating scandal, but it's even worse look when your owner obviously owns the series himself.
Correct. And when your directors of competition or your team strategists are not going to be on property for the Indy 500 for the second year in a row, that's really not a good look. And I know that track president Doug Bowles had said he feels sure that Roger Penske does not know what's been going on and is maybe he's far removed from it. I don't know, but I would think that he has to be losing his mind over all of these. This is, like you said, such a bad look. The same time of year, just really egregious things that they're doing. And you always kind of joke like, well, if they're not cheating, they're not racing. But at this level, and especially for the 500, like, what are you doing?
Well, and for anybody in the racing world, there's a term called Penske Perfect, where Penske, is known to be the most buttoned-up organization, clean-cut, and all those kind of things. And to have this kind of controversy 2 years in a row surrounding your biggest event to some degree is a bad look for the organization.
Yeah, no, it really is. And, I'm a big fan of Joseph Newgarden. Will Power, I can do without. But Scott McLaughlin, I think they're all good drivers, and I think for the most part it's a great team. But I just think, gosh darn, and I can guarantee you're going to be seeing a lot more signs and shirts and stuff that are anti-Penske, and I've already seen some people who've done some creative things. So it'll be interesting to see what people are doing and how they're reacting at the track, because people aren't happy.
There was a guy wearing a Team Cheaters T-shirt that managed to get right next to Tim Cindric, who's the team president, in the wake of all this on Sunday, which I thought was pretty funny.
That is, and it's like, okay, so of course Austin Cindric in the Cup Series, Tim is his father, so it's like, well, you think Tim will pop down and go to the Coca-Cola 600 and watch his kid race?
I would say he's got all the time in the world now if he wants to do that. Again, a second year in a row, he's not going to get to see the Indy 500 from the inside of the facility there. And last thing here, but before we go, Kyle Larson for the second year in a row is attempting the double. Qualified 21st. I guess now he'll start 19th because Newgarden and Power got moved towards the back of the field. Weather looking a little more promising for Sunday. Going to be a little bit cloudy, but I don't think the rain should be an issue, which obviously prevented him from starting the Coca-Cola 600 and even getting in the car at all because it ended up raining at Charlotte by the end of the night. But hopefully he can be only the third driver ever to run the second driver ever to run all 1,100 miles between the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, Tony Stewart with that would be really fantastic. And, yeah, they're talking about just maybe a chance for some rain in the morning, but it's actually going to be cooler, which is just kind of not normal. So that should make it really interesting as far as speeds and stuff are concerned. But looking forward to it being a good race, and hopefully the weather does cooperate.
Should be a lot of fun. Have fun out there at Indy yourself, and hopefully you won't have to sit in the parking lot for 8 hours this time.
That would be great. But I'll make sure I wave. So, you
Yeah.
watch for me.
I'll try. I'll try and pick you out of the 350,000 people there.
Right, exactly. I appreciate it, Tyler.
All right, Jen, we'll talk to you next week with some more racing coming away from the greatest weekend in racing coming up on Sunday. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. Talk some NBA playoffs coming up next. Is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you here on your Wednesday on the game as we wrap up hour number 2. Really quickly putting a bow on the conversation Jen Jensen and I just had. We mentioned Tim Cindric, who's the president of Team Penske. Literally just like 5 minutes ago, he got let go by Team Penske.
Wow.
Ahead of this weekend. Shocking. So, yeah, he's going to have a lot of free time on his hands. There's no doubt about that.
I've been seeing your tweets about the 500, about the crashes that's been going on, and you're not being a big fan of that going into the weekend.
That does concern me. A lot of cars getting airborne through practice and qualifying and all that kind of stuff. And, now you're going to put 33 of them on the track together on Sunday, and hopefully nothing catastrophic happens.
I hope not either.
Last night, NBA playoffs, mentioned a moment ago that the Timberwolves come up short 188-114 in game number 1 of the Western Conference Finals. The Oklahoma City Thunder, again, only shot 35% from the field. And look, we know Minnesota's a very, very capable team, good team led by Anthony Edwards. But, man, OKC it might just be the best overall team, especially the best one left standing as of right now. And they get lick number 1 in their home game in game number 1 of the series.
Very interesting game. The first half, Julius Randle was playing his behind off, only missing 2 shots in the first half. And it was a lot of question with Anthony Edwards being healthy, with having that lingering ankle injury from the first round Lakers series. He has to be able to muscle through this and have a response game in game 2 if they want to have a chance against SGA. Because right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder is just a well-oiled machine when you have Chet Holmgren and Jaden Williams and SGA and Alex Caruso, who is playing his behind off defensively for them, being a contributing factor. But they were shutting SGA down. He was 2 for 11 in the first half, but they just came alive in that second half and just had a whole snowball effect to get them that win last night.
SGA, 31 points last night. Obviously, we expect that he's going to be the league MVP.
Yes.
This year, obviously, it was the conversation between him and Jokic.
Jokic, it is a lot of conversation that Jokic should deserve it because of his numbers, but the production with FGA and what he's been able to do, he came second last year. So, I mean, I think he deserves it, but Jokic's numbers say much more better.
I think making a deeper run in the playoff helps your case as well for SGA. Tonight, game number 1 between the Pacers and the Knicks. I think everybody is, and not that the Timberwolves and OKC is an exciting series, but I think people are really, really excited for Pacers and Knicks. Obviously, kind of a rekindling of an old rivalry. They obviously faced off against each other, last season as well. And again, the cool thing about the Final Four here is, the Knicks won the title back in the early 70s, but you're going to have your 7th different champion in the past 7 years. And I listened to Mike Greenberg yesterday on Get Up declare that the era of the super team in the NBA has officially come to an end. And I think he's very right about that. Because you have parity like you've never seen before in the league.
I mean, for right now, it's probably coming to an end, but it's not going away. I think it's going to be a point where they will come back. It's Giannis. Giannis could potentially pair up with superstars to make a super team. And going back to the playoffs, this Knicks-Pacers series is kind of going to be one for the books. TNT is carrying that series, and this will be Reggie Miller's last series calling, knowing that it is a Knicks-Pacers series. I got the Knicks in 7. I think for them, it's all about Jalen Brunson. I think him being the leading scorer in the playoffs is putting the league on notice that he is one of the best point guards, not by far the best players in the league. And he is going to show why that he is the best player in this series. And I'm not sleeping on Indiana as well. A lot of people has kind of written off Tyrese Halliburton as a player, but he has a good supporting cast around him in Indiana. So it will be a very, very entertaining series to watch tonight.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And again, you have the opportunity to see a lot of the newer, younger stars of the NBA. And again, we've all loved, watching the stars of Steph Curry and LeBron and stuff like that dominate for so many years, but this truly seems like kind of the changing of the guard era these past handful of years. And again, whether it is Brunson, Halliburton, Anthony Edwards with the Minnesota Timberwolves, like you're going to see likely one of these young stars raising a title here coming up in a couple weeks.
And it's good to see because it is really the passing of a torch from generation to generation. is kind of, we're not seeing LeBron, we're not seeing Steph, but this is really the future of the NBA in front of our eyes for the next 6 weeks with the playoffs still going on.
God, we should probably be, 3 to 4 games in to each series by this time next week?
I think both of them going to 7.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll talk about it next week and see if we got an idea of who's going to be in the NBA Finals by that point in time. Jay, we'll see you next Wednesday.
Hey, good too, bro.
That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. 11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and West in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Chris Clark joining us via the phone lines today for a couple segments. Guys, unfortunately, as we probably figured we'd be talking about this morning, the Gamecock baseball season has officially come to an end. Fall 11-3 yesterday to Florida in the first round of the SEC tournament, and a game that, and Maneri alluded to this after the game, was very reminiscent of what a lot of the season has been. Missed opportunities with guys on base, let a lot of runs cross the plate, gave up a ton of home runs, and obviously the season, kind of ends on a whimper. And now we ask a lot of questions over the course of the next couple of months of what can you do differently, what can you make better, to hope that 2026 can be better than what legitimately was a historically bad season in SEC play.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's been, frankly, so bad that we've already been having that conversation you're alluding to a little bit for, a few weeks now. And, yeah, yesterday was kind of a microcosm. And here's the thing. You don't have to – the beauty of baseball is you don't have to be, an elite pitching team to win games. You don't have to be an elite hitting team to win games. You don't have to be an elite defensive team to win games. But you better have something you can kind of hang your hat on. And, and even within all those given areas, you don't have to be a team that hits a ton of home runs. But unfortunately for South Carolina, this is a lineup that did not hit a lot of home runs, but then they also struggled to score to bring runners across when they had runners in scoring position. So you kind of have to be one or the other. I don't think the lineup itself was historically bad. I think this is an offense that you maybe could have won some games with if you had really good pitching on the other side. But unfortunately for South Carolina, they just were never able to pitch, the way they needed to win games. And, yesterday, Maneri said it. You give up a bunch of home runs. You can't take advantage of opportunities at the plate. And, they were just quite very simply the better team.
So a micro thought on the game itself, and then, I'm pretty sure we'll switch gears to kind of the bigger picture as we have been for a while. But, I thought it did sum it up. It did sum up the season in that you struggle with pitching, you struggle with hitting the ball either for power or, as you said, Wes, situationally. But then you also just have these things that are kind of, unexplainable to where you just look at it and go, okay, that's a new way, to lose, and not that the game was lost in the first inning by any means. South Carolina actually struck first, but, just to kind of add fuel to the fire, you load the bases with nobody out, and then SEC umpiring can't figure out how many balls and strikes are called after Nathan Hall draws a walk. And it takes, apparently they were, watching it on a VCR that wouldn't rewind or something, and took forever. And Billy Barlow from Florida was scuffling a little even into the next inning and beyond. But, you let him get warm-up tosses, kind of get things right. Kevin O'Sullivan, now he might have taken a visit to the mound anyway, but you basically get an extended reset period. Then you immediately hit into a double play. Yeah, you get one run, but point is you had the bases loaded with nobody else, and then, they get out of the inning with just one run. Now, you can say, well, Chris, South Carolina's fault. They hit into a double play. Yes, and we've seen that actually a lot. We've seen, again, like you said, Wes, the lack of situational hitting. That didn't help matters, right? So it's kind of just – it's been a season of if it's not one thing, it's another. And I think you make a great point, Wes, to the extent in some games where South Carolina has scored enough runs to win, the pitching has just not been there. And I think that leads to the bigger picture thought, that we've been talking about. How do you change things for the better? And Paul Maneri doubled down after the game that just in terms of staffing, he has no plans to alter anything, which has certainly caused some discussion among Gamecock fans.
quickly, you mentioned that Gaff came to the umpiring and in the first inning there, and I believe he was behind the plate last night. I do want to point out I have no relation to Jeff Head, the umpire, so do not come at me for the Gaff that happened in the game last night. I do have a cousin by the name, but it's not the same guy. And you're right, Mainieri did double down last night. He was asked about Terry Rooney and said, no, Terry Rooney's not going anywhere. No staff changes, so alluding to the fact that, Monty Lee's not going to go anywhere either. And I brought this up earlier with Jack, and I feel like that's the wrong way to answer that question. And you don't have to come up there and say, yeah, we're definitely going to fire Terry Rooney or, get this guy or whatever it may be. But I feel like when you have, again, the worst season in the history of being in the SEC, you should be willing to examine anything and everything. And again, you don't have to make a decision 10 minutes after the season has ended, but be willing to say, hey, we're going to take the time, we're going to analyze everything and decide what we need to do to make this program better. By just saying, well, no, we're not going to make any staff changes, I think that's a little disingenuous to your fan base, because that's telling me you're not willing to do anything and everything to make this better.
Yeah, and I think, typically I don't always put much stock when coaches say stuff like that. But he did say it so definitively is what kind of stood out to me. Like, most of the time coaches say, you kind of, there's a certain level of coach speak that you've come to expect. And, hey, coach, are you going to fire your offensive coordinator? Like we see it in football all the time. Oh, yeah, our offensive coordinator will be back. And then a week later, the guy's gone. Like, I mean, I put little to no stock in what coaches say about assistant coaches. I still think, it is, I don't want to say, hey, something's going to happen, but are you shocked if there are changes on the staff? I would still say no, but what stuck to me was just how definitively he said it. When you probably, to Tyler's point, could have pretty easily just been like, hey, we had the season we had, we're going to look at everything. You could have just put it into the category of you don't have a season like this and not evaluate every single aspect of your program. And, I think there's a lot of disheartened Gamecocks out there right now to kind of hear that, because it does speak a little bit to the mindset of, hey, maybe things aren't as bad as you think they are, whereas the record shows us differently.
Well, and I'd contrast it to just kind of thinking, not baseball, obviously, but here at Carolina, how Shane Beamer's handled some things. And to your point, Wes, Shane Beamer's faced some questions at times during his 4 seasons here so far of, you consider any staff changes, typically on offense, right? But even sometimes, just whole staff picture. And he's always taken the, just generally we'll evaluate everything after the season. And he was really faced with those questions the most after the 2023 season. And I don't remember, to be honest with you, precisely what he said after the Clemson game that kept them kept them away from bowl eligibility and was a rivalry loss at home. But he did go through and he did, he did basically take the posture of, hey, we'll look at that. I'll be evaluating everything. We didn't have the type of season we should have. And then he went and he evaluated it, and he made some changes. He made some tweaks. And, other areas he stood pat. He stood pat, for instance, on Clayton White, who just fielded a really, really good defense last season, right? So in some ways, a lot of the moves that he made were right. And so when you're thinking about Mainieri and his decision-making, that did stick out to me. It was surprising that, would I have been shocked one way or another if we get into next season and the staff is the same or the staff's different? No, I really wouldn't. But I was surprised that he made that definitive of a statement this early. And I think we do have, whether or not something changes with that, it seems like Mainieri's approach to this offseason so far is going to be keep the staff intact, probably. But he seems to be much more focused on the roster. And, guys, it really seems like this is going to be a much, much different roster next season, because you already know they're hitting JUCO hard. They're going to hit the portal hard. What are there any key pieces that'll come back from this current roster? There's a lot, but if you're looking for, changes in turnover, it really seems like his focus is mostly on this roster.
And the transfer portal opens up on June the 2nd, but as we know, conversations are already being had, and I imagine with the fact that this team hasn't been playing for a whole lot these past couple weeks, a lot of players that aren't going to be returning to this team have already made their mind up that is, going to be the case, and it's going to be interesting to see who leaves and obviously who they bring in. But, I do wonder, because, again, for how bad the season was, there's not a whole lot of highlights to look back on, but you did have some promising young guys, namely some freshmen like KJ Scobie, Bo Hollins, Gavin Rayland, that you feel like can be potential future pieces to build around going forward. Can you retain all those guys? Jace Wood has another year. He had a solid season himself. Can you get him back? Like, those are kind of key pieces I'm looking at and seeing what their decisions are ultimately, and if the staff can retain them as kind of starting points for what the 2026 team is going to be.
What about Henry Kazmar, too?
Henry Kazmar as well. That's true.
I mean, that's a guy who ended up having, after a slow start, a phenomenal year for you. So can you get him back in the mix? I mean, you have some guys to build around, because I don't know if you can just build an entire roster that's going to compete in the SEC out of the portal alone. And, and the reason for that is so you'd have to hit on so many guys, right? Like, you're going to miss. They missed on some guys, frankly, from an evaluation standpoint, that they brought in this past offseason. So if you're doing high school classes, right, and old school, high school and JUCO, if you bring in 15 guys or something and you miss on several of them, it's like, well, all right, we weren't counting on that guy to play this year anyway. It's a miss to be corrected as you go along. If you're bringing in an entire team of portal guys and you're saying, well, we need that guy to play left field, we need that guy to play center field, that guy to play right, and you're literally having to check them all off, well, you start missing on evaluations, and you've taken away that spot for this season. So, not to mention the financial aspects of having to get what you need from an NIL standpoint to go portal. Then, on top of that, you've got to rebuild this pitching staff. And I actually think if you can retain those guys we're talking about, you have a pretty decent core to build your starting lineup around. I wonder, for one, I mean, I feel like the entirety of the pitching was frankly so poor. We don't even know, like, there's talent in this staff, but we don't really know who is where. You know what I'm saying? And who can act, who has upside, who doesn't, who is a future star, who's not. I know it would help a lot if you could go find a true Friday night SEC ace, but how many of those guys are out there as well, and are just waiting in the portal? And then which of them are willing to play for a team that did what happened last year, this year, the one that just happened, I should say. Unfortunately, I mean, there's going to be more questions than answers. God, it is hard to just build a team, to build a roster from the portal. It's not, I don't even know if it's possible. Yeah, and again, a lot of work to be done this offseason to try to make your number two under Paul Maneri better. I made a comparison a little bit earlier with the South Carolina baseball program. I don't want to get your guys' thoughts on it coming up next, and we'll hit that next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris on your Wednesday on the Game. All right, folks, let me tell you about our friends at Firehouse Subs, our presenting sponsor here every single episode of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Almost lunchtime. Hit up our friends at Firehouse by heading on over to firehousesubs.com, or, as we always tell you, download the app, hit the Rapid Rescue to go. You can have that order waiting for you right there on the shelf. whatever it is you love from Firehouse, whether it is the 2 new hook and ladders, the zesty garlic hook and ladder, the spicy dill hook and ladder, or your all-time, your classics, your favorites, they got something for you there. And, of course, we've been telling you for a couple months now, Hot Sauce Bar is back, so you can add any flavor that they have to any sub when you dine in or pick up. So be right there on the huge shelf waiting for you there, right by your sandwich in the bag. So the other great thing about Firehouse Subs, no matter where you are here in the Midlands, there is a Firehouse Subs right near you. So go ahead, hit them up for lunch today, firehousesubs.com and the Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris, along with you here, breaking down the end of a tough baseball season for Palminteri in year number 1 here at South Carolina. I brought this up to Jack earlier. I've kind of had this thought leading up to the end of the season. I wanted to wait for the season to actually be over to share it. I feel like South Carolina baseball has gotten to a point now very similar to where Nebraska football is, right? You know, Nebraska football was the standard of, NCAA football back in the 90s, 3 national championships in 4 years, like South Carolina was for baseball with 2 back-to-back national championships and playing for a third over a decade ago. And obviously last week with the In Spirit documentary, we all got to relive those memories and look back on that. But that's getting further and further in the rearview mirror. I mean, you're looking at the crop of freshmen coming in this year that would have been, 4 or 5 the last time you were in Omaha playing for a national championship. This crop of talent doesn't remember you at the height of your dominance in college baseball. You had a period of time where you were good but not great. Nebraska had those 9-win, 10-win seasons with Bo Pelini. They thought that wasn't good enough, and they made a change. And it hasn't worked out for them since. Carolina baseball, between Chad Holbrook and Mark Kingston, you made several NCAA tournaments, couple super regionals, but never got back to Omaha. And you made a change because of that. And now you're at a point where you have a coach, in Nebraska's case, it's Matt Rule, who was thought to be the rebuilder. Jury's still out on that, 12-13 so far through 2 seasons. And obviously we know what just happened with Paul Maneri in year number 1. So I look at those two programs, again, different sports, but a lot of similarities between where they were and where they're at now.
Yeah, I don't think it's a perfect 1-to-1, but there's definitely, I would say, similarities in terms of the fact that you are a former power and, you as a fan base see yourself in that position as well. And the results just have not come as of late. I think the biggest difference is that, if you're South Carolina, you're just in a conference right now that is completely and entirely unforgiving from week to week. And if you have a team that's going to struggle, you are going to struggle almost every weekend because there is no let up. And so, I think it will expose you way quicker than, maybe Nebraska. I feel like for years, especially before they moved conferences, they were just kind of floating out there in the middle, kind of just not great, not terrible. And, maybe you could say the same for South Carolina a little bit over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. But the difference right now is just, I think, the level of play you're facing and the standard you're going to have to get to compete in this league the way it is right now is different than even what it was when you were at the peak of your powers. Those teams were amazing for South Carolina, obviously, but even back then, as good as the league was, it was not where it is right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's only gotten more difficult, and so you can't just, the fact that you are South Carolina and you have a great fan base and, there are certainly newer, bigger, even nicer parks in the SEC now in that arms race. South Carolina was one of the first on the scene with what became Founders Park, Ray Tanner Field. Still a great ballpark, right? And you have talent in the state of South Carolina and in the Southeast, and you have a legacy and tradition in your program, and those things help you because it's not just an idea or a concept that you can be successful. It's kind of like if you, again, not a perfect 1-to-1, but you kind of go Alabama football or something, right? It's, hey, this has been done. And so then they had some lean years, and you kind of have to resurrect things. And that's what everybody's been waiting on, is waking the giant back up from this hibernation. And to be clear, it's not like they've been awful every single year. They've had more than one season where they're right on the cusp of going to Omaha. I mean, one of them was in 2023. I mean, I'm still convinced if Noah Hall was not injured, a couple other factors in there, that's probably an Omaha team. And who knows what they would have done. And it would have been a different situation, but it didn't. And that's how it played out. So there have been some solid or good seasons in there. There have been some, like this one, as the best example, that have not been. And that's what the fan base is waiting on. So on one hand, you've got the fact that you can point to success and it's been done. But to your point, Wes, it is a lot harder to do it now. And you really have to be very buttoned up as a program. You have to have a clear plan. You can't just, and I'm not saying anybody's doing this, you can't just assume people are going to come to South Carolina because, they went to Omaha 3 times in a row and won 2 national titles in a row 15 years ago. You have to earn it now because, look at Tennessee. They didn't do much of anything in baseball, and now they're one of the best programs in the country. And other programs that have perennially been strong are still strong. And even the bottom of the league, or the middle of the pack are very, very tough outs. And so you got to be really, really good just in all aspects of your program. And that leads us, again, to the offseason conversation. How can you get back there?
Well, and you mentioned, you can't necessarily sell what South Carolina was over a decade ago now to younger guys that didn't really see that, with their own eyes. And the same thing can be said about Palmineri as well. Because, last year we talked about, hey, come play for a guy that, has won a College World Series, been to Omaha a ton of times and those kind of things. But now that you've seen him through his first year back in this new era of college sports, I don't know if you can sell that same kind of thing to recruits from the JUCO level or other colleges coming in from the transfer portal because of how bad this season was. I don't think you get that benefit of the doubt of, hey, he knows what he's doing. He's been there before, because, again, it didn't work this year the way that it was supposed to.
And I think you could have done that if you had a solid season this year. I think that was certainly the plan coming into this year. And when you hire a guy like that, these kids aren't stupid. They can go look at the wall out there and see what the program's been. I think Jace Woida sat here and talked to us about, being a guy from the Midwest and paying attention to South Carolina teams that were out in Omaha. So, these kids, I think if they're any student of the game at all, they know what this program has been. The in-state guys still know what this program has been, but certainly in terms of what you thought this thing could be by sort of going you're basically trying to go the Spurrier route, recruit to the name, recruit to what he's done, and then you thought you had the bonus of being able to recruit to those trophies that still sit out there in the center field concourse at Founders Park, and it just hasn't happened. So how now you make it much more difficult on yourself. I think that's an aspect going into this offseason too that we just don't know yet. How difficult is it going to be to recruit? You had a concept this time last year, or at least this time plus go forward a couple months in terms of what you were trying to do. How does that – if you have a guy who everything else is equal, they're in the portal, they're a difference maker, they're deciding between South Carolina and Tennessee, South Carolina and Florida. All other aspects are equal. Can you go win those battles? And I think here's the other thing I just wonder about, and I'm thinking out loud. I just feel like there's a lack of just synergy right now overall. And I get it. Things are going to look different. I saw a quote from a football coach. Can't remember who it was. They were talking about, hey, your culture is not what you are as a program when you're winning. Everybody has great culture when they're winning. It really shows itself when you're losing. And so the fact of the matter is also, no matter how good your culture is, you are going to see some finger pointing. You're going to see disagreements. You're going to see parents who think that their child should be playing more, or that the coach doesn't know. When you're losing, all those things start to come out.
Yeah.
Period. It always happens. Every level. But that also doesn't mean you can ignore all those things either. So can they find some synergy where it just feels like everybody is back on the same page? Because certainly this season, I think, has beaten a lot of people down from the top of the program all the way to the fans. Can you get the fans excited again? Are you going to have a sellout on game one next year? You're going to have to do some real damage in the portal.
Yeah.
For people to get excited again.
About 45 seconds, Chris. Anything else to add before we let you go?
No, I think you nailed it, Wes. It's tougher nowadays. Is it even more difficult, or do you have a great opportunity? You got to look at it as an opportunity, to go rebuild this roster. But it's honestly probably even tougher than it was last offseason. So we'll see what they can do.
Again, gonna be a long offseason, a lot of questions to answer. Chris, we'll see you back in here tomorrow.
We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.
Is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. A new lawsuit. Oh, this is getting really interesting from a Tennessee basketball player against the NCAA. We'll hit that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, friends, let me tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling. That's Krantz Cooling and Heating since 1983. KrantzCooling.com. It's Krantz with a K, cooling with a K.com. Phone number 803-672-3224. Of course, if you've been outside at all the last couple weeks, you can feel that Columbia summer heat starting to roll in, and you want to make sure your house is going to be cool. So for AC repair, AC installation, and, of course, maybe most importantly right now, preventative maintenance, hit up our friends at Krantz Cooling, 803-672-3224. You don't want to be left alone in those situations, having to sit in the heat and give Krantz a call after there's already an issue. So go ahead, talk about and ask them about their maintenance plans, where you can go ahead and make sure those things are going to be covered in the future. But if you are having issues, they're going to take great care of you. Call them today, 803-672-3224.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyron West along with you for the next couple of segments as Chris had to dip out a little bit early. Quickly, want to let you know this week on the Sweet Deals tab on 1075thegame.com, Heritage Christian Academy is offering half off tuition and registration for 4th to 8th grade. That's a $5,000 value right now on the 1075thegame.com Sweet Deals tab. Again, half off tuition and registration for Heritage Christian Academy for 4th through 8th grade. We talk a lot about lawsuits on here because there are aplenty in today's world of college sports. And I saw one yesterday that may be one of the more far-reaching ones that probably still has a good chance of getting a winning side for the party that's pursuing it here. It's Kai Ziegler, who's played the past 4 seasons at Tennessee. We've seen a lot of him. I've seen the heads of South Carolina, is suing the NCAA for a 5th year of eligibility, claiming he could earn up to $4 million next year after he made $500,000 in his senior season with Tennessee Vols. Now, Zakai Ziegler has been on the team, as I mentioned, for 4 years. Never redshirted. Does not have any medical situation to warrant a medical red shirt, was not around during the COVID season to warrant a COVID year. He's legitimately played 4 full years of college basketball and is now asking for a 5th year, essentially just because. And again, we know the track record of the NCAA when it comes to lawsuits. He probably has a good chance of winning.
No. There has to be a line drawn somewhere.
There has to be, but can there be is the question. Because there hasn't really been a line up to this point. I brought this up when Diego Pavia sued the NCAA for the junior college thing, saying, hey, well, I played junior college football and I couldn't earn NIL the same way there as I could here.
That was not – the JUCO is not NCAA.
That is true. That is true. But I did say when that was ruled that way, the line was going to keep moving. Now, I didn't foresee this kind of lawsuit coming out, but here we are.
Well, this is why you have all these players that have entered the portal that have no eligibility left.
Yeah.
Like
Jamari Thomas, remember?
Yeah. But those guys aren't alone. That's we're seeing this all over the place. I don't, almost a just in case. Hey, if somebody gets eligible and sets a precedent, then I can turn around and take advantage of this situation. And now, obviously, this is going to depend on what court this ends up, what judge, all these different things. Not a lawyer, obviously. But I think, what is your argument at this point? Like, I think Diego Pavia actually had an argument. Like, how can you say that you used up your eligibility within the NCAA when JUCO does not play under the rules of the NCAA? It's its own separate entity.
Right.
Pavia, in fact, the JUCO guys actually probably have an even greater case than what was granted in that initial injunction because they only gave them 1 year if it fell under certain criteria, as opposed to just saying, hey, JUCO does not count against your eligibility. But in a lot of ways, why would it count against your eligibility?
Yeah. No, it's fair. And again, I saw where that was coming from. But again, I felt like the line was going to move at some point, and now we're here. So Zakai Ziegler's representation, which is Liston PLLC and the Garza Law Firm, released a statement Tuesday that said the NCAA's rule permitting only 4 seasons of competition within a 5-year eligibility window is an unlawful restraint of trade under federal and state antitrust laws. And again, all these lawsuits go back to antitrust and limiting a student athlete's earning potential. So my question becomes with this, if that's the stance they're taking, does that mean eligibility should have any limits at all? Because if you're saying, well, you can't limit them to 4 years in a 5-year window, what's stopping you from looking for a 6th, 7th, and 8th year of eligibility, right? Like, where does it stop? I'm not saying I'm supporting the argument here, but I'm just saying, like, at some point, where do you draw a line if you can?
I mean, how many classes are there available for you to take at a given school?
I don't know, because the argument is also that he's going to go to graduate school, so he can continue to be a student, and again, you can go be a doctor and go to school for 8 years, you know what I mean? So, like, where does it end?
Yeah, I think at some point, though, you have to be able to maintain a GPA to, like, stay, like, you literally will run out, what are you, I'm double majoring now, like, what, I mean... Yeah. Can you be a career? But dude, you're not going to be able to be a doctor. You have to.
Yeah.
No, we're not at the like. I'm talking literally. What
Sure.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't know. And
don't you run out of things you can Like at some point, do the universities themselves not say, hey, we're just making a joke out of this whole thing at this point?
There's no more classes that you can take. You've literally done it all at this point.
We're not interested in having you on our campus as a 28-year-old.
Now, I will say this. Again, Zakai Ziegler's played 4 years of college basketball already. You know, and look, everybody has the opportunity to go play internationally, but it doesn't seem like he was somebody that was in line to go to the NBA. And this argument is saying that he has the potential to earn up to $4 million this year at Tennessee. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the argument that they're making. I don't blame him for trying because, again, I don't know what his career aspirations are once basketball is over, but the opportunity to make millions of dollars may not be in his future. As I said about a lot of college players, grab the bag while you can, which is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to prolong this as long as they can so he can earn as much as he can through NIL to set him up for life after basketball is over. Like, I don't blame them for doing this. I don't know if they're going to win, but again, the NCAA has a terrible track record in court, so they at least have a decent shot, right?
What was this stuff is all run together? What was the recent one in the state of South Carolina where the athlete was ruled against in terms of eligibility?
Oh, man, I don't even remember now because these do all kind of run together.
Because there was talks about, hey, does this affect what we should expect for Russell Faison?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't quite the same situation, but, you know, and then for a lot of these things, again, not a lawyer, but like with Pavia, initially, it wasn't even that Pavia won the case. It was that an injunction was granted to just delay the current situation being enforced, right? So it was, hey, this is going to be decided in court, but as of right now, and then, you know, the NCAA ended up granting that extra year for JUCO guys, but it was more of a, I would say, like let's place a Band-Aid or a piece of tape on this as opposed to coming to a final decision. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of this is right now. It's just lots of Band-Aids.
Yeah, and look, if this does end up winning in court, you want to talk about floodgates being open, oh boy. Then it seems like there's no limit to eligibility if Zakai Ziegler ends up winning. So we'll see what happens. By the way, still waiting to hear on Rasul Faison and his eligibility for the 2025 season now that you brought it up. We'll come back and wrap up the hour. What does ChatGPT think of South Carolina in 2025 on the football field? How successful are they going to be? We'll answer that question coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Our friends over at Game Day Men's Health can help you as a man reclaim your vitality by optimizing hormone levels. They specialize in TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy, which will help boost your energy and strength. And they're a lot different than other clinics that do similar things. They have in-house labs that can deliver your results in just 15 minutes. They're conveniently located in Northeast Columbia near I-77 and Two Notch Road. Comfortable man cave style clinics with TVs and refreshments while you wait. Also great, they don't use any long-term contracts. Flexible plans tailored to your needs. TRT tests available to check your levels with absolutely no obligation, and then ongoing monitoring, committed to your success with expert guidance. You can get started by going to gamedaymenshealth.com/north-columbia. Again, located just off I-77, or give them a call, 803-265-3161.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Wes along with you for a few more minutes, wrapping up the show here on your Wednesday. We obviously know we live in a world with AI and things like that that can do a lot of neat things, for a variety of different, jobs and things like that. You have explored Chat GPT, get the words out of my mouth here, in terms of predicting South Carolina's 2025 upcoming season. You got an article up on GamecockCentral.com. What's the process of doing this? How do you input all this data to get to spit out the results here?
Oh, it's surprisingly and stupidly simple.
See, I've never messed with ChatGPT. I've never messed around with it.
Tyler, you gotta get with the times, man. It literally could be as simple as being like, simulate the South Carolina football season.
Okay.
And it'll just be like, and a matter of seconds later, it's going to give you a simulation. I wanted this to be a little bit more insightful. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what I did so you can just add in however much data you want. So I said, hey, I want you to simulate the South Carolina football season, and I just copied and pasted Steve Fink's spring practice preview.
Okay.
Because he had the official Gamecocks online. Here's where the offense, defense, and special teams are right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I said, here's a preview from spring. And then I did give it a little bit of info in terms of like, hey, Russell Faison as an incoming guy is someone that the staff is high on. Here are some freshman names that could potentially play this year. And then I copied and pasted the schedule in there. And then I copied and pasted the rules for the college football playoff.
Okay.
Because a lot of times these AIs, their data is from a couple of years ago. It's not always updated. So if you said, hey, simulate the season and then tell me who made the college football playoff, at least the simulation I did at first, it spat out a 4-team. So I just went and I Googled, hey, give me all the official rules of the 2024 or 2025 college football playoff. And so I gave it that data.
So, and again, you can read the full article on GamecockCentral.com, but kind of reading over just kind of like the scores in general, like all kind of vary in line with what you kind of think these type of games are. You know, you got a one-sided win against like an SC State in week number 2, some tight games in SEC play, a tight game against Clemson at the end of the year. Like, again, if you told me this is what the final results look like, it looks very believable.
Yeah, this is certainly on the happy end of this for South Carolina. It has them going 10-2 in the regular season with a win over Clemson. And again, if you plug this in 10 times, you'll probably get 10 different results. Okay. I think. It's a simulation. Like you could do 1,000 of them, and it's going to be different. But for the most part, I didn't really edit anything. I had to, in one case, I had to fill in a different name because it spit out Alex Herrera still as the kicker. So I had to change that. I just went with Mason Love, for example. But everything else in there is just to a T what it spit back out at me. And so did the Gamecocks make the college football playoff with a 10-2 record in the regular season? You're going to have to wait for the next article where we will see if they made it, assuming they made it, where they were seated, and what happened in the college football playoff.
Good tease there. Sellers ending up with about almost 3,400 yards through the air, 30 touchdowns and 7 picks. We don't have his rushing stats here, but
yeah, we do.
Okay, 610 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. Say that now. So 37 total touchdowns, basically 4,000 yards of total offense. Can you ask ChatGPT if that'll get him to the Heisman Trophy ceremony?
It did get him first-team All-SEC honors, I can tell you that.
Okay. With 13 sacks for Dylan Stewart, also maybe get him to the Heisman Trophy ceremony.
It may be dueling Gamecocks at the ceremony there. 13 sacks. That breaks the school single-season record, I believe.
What is it, 12 and a half for
I can't
Clowney?
remember what Clowney.
It's right around there.
Yeah.
3 forced fumbles.
I mean, he had a freaking tank of a season.
We will take that.
Fred J.R. Johnson with 92 tackles, 5 sacks, 2 picks, and a forced fumble. Oh, man.
We'll keep this as reference and see how close ChatGPT can get. But, yeah, if you're anywhere in the neighborhood of all these numbers, it's going to be a very, very fun season for South Carolina.
Definitely a best-case scenario simulation type thing. But I just love the fact that it put Fred J.R. Johnson like that. I didn't say that. It put it
I was
like
gonna
that.
say you have to feel good about that if that comes to fruition for sure. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, halftime show myself, Terry Ford, here on the game.
All right, folks, before I get out of here, let me tell you about our friends at Integrated Media. Whether it's making sure your AI computer is ready to spit out South Carolina results or anything else involving your home and basically audio, visuals, or computers, internet connection, our friends at just all the above. Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com. They've been to my house. They've been to Chris's house. We haven't sent them to Tyler's apartment yet, but that's on deck. Maybe you want to upgrade the man cave. Maybe you want to upgrade your living room setup, or you know what? There's a home theater link on here. Let's just go all in on turning that extra room into a home theater system. They can do that for you too. And if you go to that website, they're going to give you a bunch of ideas about stuff they've done at other homes and just empower you to do some awesome stuff with yours. Hit them up today. IntegratedMediaInc.com.